Special greetings to senior members of the Presbyterian faith, the school board, and principals, teachers, all of you all, and of course to our beloved retirees. In 1989, I'll tell you some more stories. In 1989, though, when I started my company, we used to do programs on retirement planning, and somebody said, well, you in your 40s and things, would you know about retirement? Well, they were right. I had never retired. I have since gone past the official retirement age. I'm now quite a bit older than that, and I still haven't retired, so I don't know what it is to retire. What does it feel like? I need to ask these people. But retirement, I think, is something that I don't look forward to. I really want to continue to do what I do because I just love to do it. But a pleasure to be here with you all this morning, and I need to confess that in 1989, let me go back a little bit. All that stuff that they read about me, I'm really just a little fella who grew up in Nettoville in Naparima, went to Arima Boys Government, went to St. Mary's, went away and left Trinidad in 1968, and went off to Canada. And for the first time, I was out of the reach of my parents, particularly my mother. I had a grand time. Late 60s and early 70s were the days of the hippies and free love and God is dead. And I just had a grand time in that pigsty. You know the pigsty from the prodigal son? Yeah, man, I was out there. Thankfully, I lived long enough to come back to understand the place of God in my life. And I thank him for that grace and that privilege. But I really was destined to be in this field, to be here with you all. My mother was born in Orange Hill in Tobago in 1921. And she said that before she left school, primary school, she was a teacher. There were some pillars under the house, and she said they used to eat licks from her. She used to be 1 and 1. No, it's not 3. Licks. And she would do that, and of course, apparently from early childhood, she never stopped. Until I guess her arms gave away, and she couldn't do it anymore. My father was also a teacher, and he went into teaching, and they met at training college. So I don't know, training college has something that I guess I owe a debt of gratitude to that place. And they worked together in Tobago for a while. My bigger brother was born over there, and then they came back to Trinidad. And I grew up in this house with 2 teachers. It was a pleasant experience. My father was a really cool fellow. My mother was a stickler, all right? And I got many stickers from her. But really, it was just a space. I don't know, as young as I was at the time, I don't know that I really knew what teaching was, but there was just an aura in the house that said, listen, there are things that you do your homework, you play, you enjoy yourself, but you do what has to be done. And the way people would come to the house on morning, sometimes somebody looking for a recommendation, no typewriter, no printer, or nothing like that, And I'd see my mother and father sit and write out a recommendation for somebody. This was late 50s. And it just stuck with me. So when I left school in 1966, my first job was in the public service. I see somebody counting. You must learn to do mental without moving your lips and your hands. But I worked at the Ministry of Agriculture for a couple months, but I had applied to teach. And in September of 1966, I began to teach at Tranquility Government Secondary. The boys and the girls, they were used to be Tranquility Intermediate. They had put the boys and the girls together and made it Tranquility Secondary. And I want to share something with you from a secondary school perspective. In those days, 7 periods a day, well, of course, 5 days a week, so that's 35 periods, right? Our teaching workload was somewhere between 30 and 32 periods per week. It was rough, but I was young. I thought I was bright, I was strong. I was all of 17 when I started to teach there. And it was just a time when you met older teachers, more experienced people, and I began to understand a little more what education was about. But as I say, I left, went off to Canada, and spent 13 years there. Came back at the end of 1980, and I had spent some time working in the prison system up there. And I really wanted to work in the prison system down here. But people saw my experience, thought it was really great, and therefore they were a little afraid, and they never took me into the prison system. So I said, well, why wait until somebody gets to prison to work for them? Why not get them before they get to prison? So I picked up my old education hat, and I joined the guidance unit. I became a guidance officer in 1981 and worked there in Northeastern College and Tobago Composite for 8 years until 1989. I don't know what you all feel like as secondary school teachers, but when I joined there, I was 1989, what was I? I was just about, no, not 1989, 1981, I was just about early 30s, 32, somewhere around there. And I used to get along with the children quite well. And by the time I got close to 40, I found the children started to change. They were different. I wasn't keeping up with the slangs, the music, or with them. And I thought I needed to move on. It was a difficult time because I also had some difficulties with administration in the guidance unit and in the school. And you know, sometimes when you want to move, you create your own crisis. So in January of 1989, Lionel Ramuta was the principal at Northeastern at the time. I went to school and I said, I'm not talking to the principal. I'm just going to do my work. And I was at Northeastern, Tobago Composite, and I was all over the place. Sister Rosario was starting a special school in Matlot. Minister of Education, Clive Pantin at the time, had started Corial Post-Primary Center, so they asked me to help there. So I was on the road and not talking to the principal. So Mr. Ramuta sent a letter to the ministry saying I stopped reporting for duty. I actually stopped talking to him, right? But I was still working very hard. And of course, when in those days they tell you, you receive a letter saying that you stop reporting for duty, they used to stop your salary. So at the end of March, everybody else got paid except me. So it was a kind of seminal moment in my life. And I realized I was, in a sense, creating my crisis because I needed to leave. The job was becoming pretty difficult. I was becoming a little tired and stressed by the job. And I left. I didn't desert. I actually left so that I could recharge my batteries and come back and work with teachers like you. And leaving the system at the time was something of a key moment for me. And it really speaks to the fact that on mornings, I used to get up, I live in Sao still, got up, I would drink my coffee, and I would tap my cup on the arm of the chair and then ask myself a question. Do I really have to go to school today? And I would think about the children and say, yes, you have to go to school. And I went to school. But before that, I used to park my car in front, open my guidance office, and the door would be wide open, and children would come, sir, I could talk to you. In those last few months, I used to park my car towards the back of the school. I would unlock the guidance office, but I wouldn't swing the door open. So from across the courtyard, they wouldn't be sure if I was there. But some little voice would always come, sir, I could talk to you. And I used to say yes. That was a massive lie, because I really didn't want to talk with anybody. I didn't want to see anybody, but I would play the part. And they'd come in, I'd sit down, listen to them, give them the guidance, give them the information they needed. But I knew that I could not continue to live the lie. If we love our children, if we love the work that we do, we must be honest with ourselves, with them, and with God. I knew I had to leave, so I told them, let me tell you this story. Mr. Ramuta, rest his soul, he's no longer alive. But you know, I went to the guidance unit and I said, take me out of that school, because I'm going to get myself in trouble. I wouldn't tell you what I told them I would do. My guidance supervisor said, well, you know, Mr. Watkins, that's not the way to apply for a transfer. I said, okay, if that's not the way, don't transfer me, leave me there, and you'll see what will happen. In a week or so, they called me and said they had a vacancy in Tunapuna Secondary. I went there, spent a term, and I realized I didn't need a change of school. I needed to be out of the space. Sometimes we get to a place in our lives where the work becomes so burdensome, so tough, so difficult, that we really need to ask ourselves an honest question. Am I doing justice to myself, to the profession, to the children, to the ministry, and to the future? And if you're in that place, ask yourself the question, get somebody to talk to, because it really is not worth it to continue to do something, and as I say, to live the lie and pretending that you're in a good place. And I know that the education is not an easy place to be. I've experienced it. And yes, as we think about the theme today, the issue of thriving in a dynamic environment, yes, it's dynamic. And it's dynamic because a lot of the old order has changed in the name of what we call, or they call, progress and development. There are all kinds of theories about people and gender and life and how we should live that are being espoused all over. So principles are being discarded. Technology is challenging people's relationships, and the voices of deviance plant seeds that challenge the word of God. It is a difficult time. Dynamic doesn't always mean good. So we are in a difficult place. And it reminds me of something that I came across many years ago called the paradox of our times. And it says that we have wider highways, but narrower viewpoints. We eat more food, but we get less nutrition. We live in larger houses, but we have more broken homes. There's more communication technology, but we are less and less in touch with ourselves and the people around us. Taller buildings, shorter tempers. More money, less value for life. More conveniences, but somehow or other we seem to have less time than ever before. That's the paradox of the times we live in. But there are some other paradoxes that teach us some valuable lessons. And one of them is that every problem brings with it a gift. Think about your growing times. They weren't the easy times in your life. The difficult times in your life are the times when you become more resolute, when you make clear decisions, when you become more focused and recommit yourself to something that is noble. Another paradox is that creation begins with destruction. You have your house, you have your lawn, but you want an extension. Well, you have to destroy your lawn to be able to get that extension. Sometimes we have to destroy the thoughts that we have carried for life in order to think something new and move into new spaces. We recognize, of course, that in danger, there is always opportunity. So we live with paradox every day that we live. And, sometimes it lives even in our proverbs, Say, out of sight, out of mind. But absence makes the heart grow fonder. Contradictions, but we live with them and we make it. But what is the gift in this dynamic environment in which we live? Well, one of the gifts is that we have the opportunity to revisit the power of purpose. Because sometimes the what doesn't seem to be doing it for us, but the why has significant potential. Difficulties in a dynamic environment like this may cause us to lift ourselves up above the clouds and look down and ask, what's going on down there? Why are we here? What am I really doing? Our presence on earth, your presence in the job that you're doing right now, is not by any means an accident. Let me share a story with you. I had left university in Toronto and was sort of wondering about the place, and signed up for a course on probation and aftercare. We're doing probation with youths. The book that was necessary for the program was not available in the bookstores downtown, but they told me that it was available at a publisher on the west end of Toronto. So I got on the subway, got to the end of the line, got on a bus, and was going down. And I missed the bus stop at the publisher's place. When I got out, there was a building across the road, and the sign said, Mimico Correctional Center. I said, that's interesting. I walked back to the publisher, got the book, came out and stood at the bus stop, and of course, Canada is a kind of regulated society, so they have a schedule with all the buses, what time the bus comes, 9:21, 10:03, and things actually work on schedule like that. And I looked at the schedule and realized the next bus wasn't coming for another 20 or 25 minutes. So I walked back to Mimico Correctional Center, walked into the door, and I said to the person, I just graduated, I have a degree in psychology and so on. Do you all have any jobs here? They said, yes, you can become a correctional officer. I said, what is a correctional officer? Jail guard, a turnkey. They said, well, we have positions for correctional officers. So she said, yes, we have that. I said, okay. My heart kind of fell. I didn't want to just leave university. I go, be a turnkey, jail guard, no. But she says, well, the deputy commissioner is here. If you want, you could speak with him. I said, okay, fine. I had the time. I walked into the room and I saw this man. And I said, I've met you before. He says, yes, I know your face somewhere. Well, about a year previous to that, I was doing a little program at the Addiction Research Foundation in Canada, in Toronto. And he was also present in the program. He was there, I was there, course finished, we went our respective ways. A year later, I walk into this room, and this man is here, and he says, what are you doing here? I said, well, I graduated and so on, and actually I was just checking to see if there were any jobs here. He says, well, yes, you have jobs as a correctional officer. Are you interested? I said, well, yes, I wasn't working. He says, would you like to start tomorrow? I said, yes. That was it. I started to work as a correctional officer. But in that space, when you're in a ministry like that, there are jobs that are advertised within the system that if you're outside, you don't get them. So I worked there as a prison officer for a couple of years, and then there was an opportunity to work in a unit where they were doing pretrial psychiatric assessments on a multidisciplinary team. And what did they want? Psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, medical social workers, psychiatric assistants, and they wanted people who were working in a correctional, custodial setting and who had a behavioral science background. 5 people in the province of Ontario were to be selected, and I was one. Came out at the wrong bus stop. Came and stood at the bus stop and saw that there was time. Walked into a place and met someone who I had met in passing a year before, and that person offered me a job. Accident, coincidence, or the hand of God? We have to understand that where we are is not an accident. We are called to purpose. So let me reference the book of Jeremiah. Chapter 1, verse 5 says this: before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. We have been called. There are people whose lives we are destined to touch by virtue of our presence and where we are in the job that we do. But as dynamic as the situation is, as turbulent as the storm may be, we might tell ourselves, I really can't handle this. Now, I'm sharing this with you at my present age, right? Some of you may have calculated already. I wasn't as wise as this when I was giving Mr. Ramota trouble at Northeastern College. So understand that sometimes we are in a space and we're doing things, but we're not always sure what we're impacting and what is being impacted, by us. But the book of 1 Peter chapter 4 says this: each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. We have within us, He knew us before we were born, and He has given us talents, He has given us skills. He has put us in a particular place so that we can serve His purpose. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is God's purpose that will prevail. So we ask ourselves, why am I here? Why am I a teacher? Why am I in this place that is dynamic, maybe pressure-filled, maybe a little turbulent, maybe a little dissatisfying? Why am I here? What is our purpose collectively as educators, as teachers, as shepherds in the life of the young people who come to school in our space? The fact is that other people are challenged in this dynamic environment. Our families and our communities are in deep turmoil. They are fractured. People are stressed. And all kinds of inhuman things are taking place within those situations. Children wake up in the morning, dress, put on their wachikong. Well, not anymore. And they come to us. And we may not have any idea where they are coming from. We don't know what they experienced last night. The parents come to us, and we don't know what they have been through. And we really need to ask ourselves, what is my purpose? To get through the syllabus and prepare people and make sure the SBA done and they're ready for exams. That's not purpose. That's a what. We have to ask ourselves, why are we in the place where we are? What are people coming with? And where are they coming from? I have this picture in my head as a little boy growing up in Naparima in the 1950s of going to the shop, go and buy a pound of rice, and you go to the shop. And the shopkeeper would take a piece of brown paper, put it in the scale pan. He'd put the 1 pound weight on the scale. He would dip some rice from in the bag, and he would throw it into the scale pan, and nothing would happen. And then he would do this. 3 more grains of rice would come out of that dipper, and the scale pan would move. All of us have stuff in our scale pan. Everybody has stuff. And maybe I could quote from the children, I'm not that far from it. Everybody toting. We have stuff in our scale pan, and sometimes all it takes is 3 more grains of rice to tip us over the edge. Children are standing on the edge. Parents are standing on the edge. I don't know if you know it, but some of your colleagues might be standing on the edge. And what does it take from us? As educators, we have been called to be in that place, to set the captives free. We have to bring people back from the edge. What we say to them, what we say to people, can have the impact of tipping people over. Let's pull people back from the edge. Let's invite them to come into a place of warmth, a place of understanding. Luke chapter 4, verse 18 says this: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are bruised." As educators, we have the opportunity to do all of those things. The door is open for us. Say, well, where's all this thing Watkins telling me, boy, I can't do all that. Do we have the power? Yes, we do. We have been prepared for where we are. Every life experience that we have had has been the opportunity to build and to develop skills. Let me see a quick show of hands. How many people here are firstborn children? Quick show of hands. Way. Okay, hands down. How many people here are not firstborn, but the child before them was at least 3 years older than they were? Let me see those hands now. You all are also firstborn, in case you didn't know it. In terms of the dynamic of being firstborn, there's a lot of research that says firstborn children are more highly represented among high achievers than children further down in the line. And I'll tell you why. It has nothing to do with biologically passing that way first. Nothing to do with that. It's a social issue. Firstborn children have high expectations placed on them. Firstborn children have more opportunities to take charge and to be leaders. And firstborns have greater opportunity for feedback. Firstborn children, every time they turn, picture. By the time you get to the 4th child, you don't even know where the camera is. But understand it, just by virtue of being born when you were born in that line of siblings, you were prepared. That was your first leadership development program that you went to. If you were a class prefect, if you were a patrol leader in Scouts, if you were head boy, head girl, captain of the netball team, whatever you were, that was an opportunity to develop your leadership skills. You were being prepared for a time such as this. In the area where you live, and we often don't recognize how skilled and how powerful and how experienced we are. So when the storm rages, we say, I don't think I could handle this. I want you to ask any mechanic in the area where you live how many skills she has. You see me, I gender, she has. Any mechanic by you is a she. All right? Okay. Or he. All right, just in case. That person will tell you, boss, I have one skill, I just fix car. To fix your car, here's what that mechanic has to do. Listen attentively. Diagnose the problem. Observe the machine. Dismantle it. Replace the part. Reassemble it. Test it. Explain to you what happened and give you some advice on what you need to do going forward. 10 skills to fix your car. If that person owns the garage, they're doing some supervision, some purchasing, some work scheduling, some customer service, some stock taking. And that person will tell you they have one skill. They just fix car. How many skills do you have? If you looked at all your life experiences, all the things that you have done, all the things you've been called to organize and to do, the people who come to you because you're just a good listener. Think of it. All of those skills over your lifetime have prepared you for a time such as this. While we have the power, and if we can understand that, we must also recognize how important it is to take care of ourselves. The Bible says, love your neighbor, full stop. Yes? That's not what it says? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So you need to love yourself. Well, that's a powerful lesson. Because sometimes, and without being blasphemous, no disrespect intended to Jesus, sometimes he would be with his people and they'd be doing their work, and then he would kind of disappear, running away from work half day, But where was he going? Back to the source, prayer, meditation, looking after himself, reconnecting with the source of all power. Why? So that he can come back and do the work that he was called to do. And we need at times, as much as we love the children and love our colleagues and love everything and want to do everything for everybody, pull aside, park, take some time, reconnect, recharge your batteries so that you come back in a way that is worthy of the task to which you were called. So you need to set some boundaries at times. You're no good to anyone if you're no good to yourself. What we also have to do, even as we have that sense of purpose and we understand the amount of power that we have and that we take care of ourselves, there's something else inside of us that we need. And it is about faith and courage. And I'm saying maintain your faith and live with courage. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a spirit, and they cried out in fear. Storm, dynamic environment, call it what you want, it's a time of difficulty. And something comes to us, and we're afraid, I don't know if I should do this. Who is this thing? What is this thing coming at me? But straight away Jesus spake unto them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come unto thee on the water. So we're in a time of storm, we're in a dynamic environment, and we're saying, listen, I want to be able to do this. And Jesus said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Things going good. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Sometimes we want to go out there to do what has to be done. We prepare to step into the storm. We prepare to walk on water. But can we maintain the faith? Can we get rid of the doubt so that we can continue to do what we're doing? And that issue of faith and courage is critical. I like to quote an old Spanish bullfighter who says, to fight a bull when you are not afraid is nothing. To not fight a bull when you are afraid is nothing. But to fight a bull when you are afraid, that is something. And it's about feeling what we feel, being uneasy, but being prepared to continue to do what we are called to do. And you have all been called. Understanding the power of God's purpose for our life, and let me make a little thing, you know, for years after I'd come back from being prodigal and returned to the arms of God, I said, you know, I want to understand what my purpose in life is. What's my purpose for my life? And I tried for 2-3 years to discover my purpose for my life. Until one day that voice said to me, your purpose for your life? And I recognized in that moment that the life that I have wasn't mine. It was a life that was lent to me by God for some years. And that the purpose I needed to find was not my purpose for this life, but His purpose for the life that He had loaned me. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is God's purpose that will prevail. So when we live in that kind of way, we ask ourselves, I wonder what difference I can make in this teaching. You need to ask somebody else the question. What difference have you been called to make in the lives of the children and the parents who you encounter? Because the children that you meet, those lives that you touch, one day they will be parents. The life that you help them to live becomes the space in which others will grow. The parent who comes to you and feels respected, received, and in a sense, a little less torn than they were, goes back and creates a different evening experience for the child that comes home or for the spouse that comes home. Understand the power of that. We have the opportunity to touch people's lives in a real way. And as we improve their life chances now via education and example and mentorship and coaching and friendship, what we are doing is creating and crafting someone who will have children and whose children will have children. And we are touching generations that are not yet born. That's what we are called to do. So in this dynamic environment, understand where you came from. Understand the purpose for which you were created. Know that you have the power and skill to fulfill that purpose. Love and take care of yourself. Live and work with a sense of tomorrow and your legacy. And go forward with courage and faith. Why? Because when fear meets courage, courage wins. When despair meets hope, hope wins. When death meets life, life wins. And when doubt meets faith, faith wins. Continue to live and work with courage, hope, and faith. Thank you.